The Malthari dreadnought, Eclipse of Dawn, drifted through the void, its bioluminescent hull shimmering with the faint aurora of ionized particles. The ship was a masterpiece of flowing organic architecture, crystalline silver spires arcing like wind, carved dunes, translucent panels pulsing with veins of violet energy. To the Malthari, it was elegance incarnate, a testament to their mastery over the cosmos. Commander Malvar stood at the heart of the command nexus, his four-fingered hands resting on the smooth, aerogel surface of the tactical display. The air hummed with the soft resonance of their technology, a sound like distant wind chimes. His third eyelids flicked shut for a moment, filtering the dim glow of the holographic star map before him. "Unidentified contact," announced Thelolin, the ship's lead scientist, his voice a melodic ripple of harmonics. "Near the dead star's accretion disk. Minimal energy signature." Malvar exhaled through his nasal vents, the sound a whisper of amusement. Another derelict, no doubt some forgotten relic of a lesser species. The galaxy was littered with them. "Run a full scan," he commanded, his crest of crystalline spines flexing in mild curiosity. Thelolin's fingers danced across the console, and the ship's sensors pulsed outward, bathing the unknown vessel in waves of probing energy. The data returned in cascading streams of violet light, painting a picture before them. The ship was small, pitifully so by Malthari standards. Its design was blocky, angular, lacking the flowing grace of their own vessels. Primitive fusion reactors, crude alloy plating, no visible shield harmonics. A human construct, then. The Malthari had long dismissed humanity as a fractured, impulsive species, too busy warring among themselves to pose any real threat. "Derelict," Thelolin confirmed, his voice laced with disinterest. "Likely a lost scout vessel. No active systems detected." Malvar's crest relaxed, just as he had expected. Then the human ship moved. It was subtle at first, a flicker of power, a single thruster adjusting its angle. Then, with terrifying precision, the vessel rotated, aligning itself directly toward the Eclipse of Dawn. Malvar's spines flared in alarm. "Status!" Thelolin's fingers flew over the console, his bioluminescent markings flickering with urgency. "Energy spike." Their reactor just. The human ship's engines ignited. Not the sluggish, inefficient burn of a dying vessel. Not the erratic flare of a malfunctioning drive, of controlled burn, a predator's lunge. The ship accelerated toward them, its trajectory flawless, its speed vice impossible for something so primitive. Malvar's blood ran cold. This was no derelict. This was a hunter. The Malthari bridge hummed with tension, the air thick with the scent of ionized ozone, and the faint, metallic tang of unease. Malvar's claws flexed against the command throne, his instincts screaming at him to act. But his training held him still. The human ship should not exist. It was a relic, a crude construct of welded steel and primitive alloys, its design archaic by any galactic standard. Yet it moved with the precision of a blade, its thrusters flaring in perfect synchronization as it closed the distance. Thelolin's voice cut through the silence, sharp with disbelief. "Captain, our sensors still show nothing, no reactor signature, no life signs. It's as if the ship is being propelled by ghosts." Malvar's secondary eyelids flicked shut for a fraction of a second, a reflexive response to the impossibility before him. The Malthari had mapped the stars for millennia, their technology woven from the very fabric of the cosmos, crystalline energy matrices, aerogel-infused hulls, weapons that bent space itself. They as understood physics, and yet, this human vessel defied them. "Full scan," Malvar ordered, his voice low. "Every frequency, every wavelength. I want to know what we're dealing with." The Eclipse of Dawn shuddered as its sensor arrays pulsed outward, bathing the void in streams of violet, white energy. The readings should have illuminated the human ship's secrets, peeling back its layers like the pages of a data slate. Instead, they found only silence. The ship was there, visually, tangibly, but to the Malthari's most advanced systems, It did not exist. A murmur rippled through the crew, their bioluminescent markings flickering in erratic patterns, betraying their unease. Malvar forced his spines to remain rigid, refusing to let his own uncertainty show. "Captain," Thelalan said, his voice strained. "It's not just the sensors. Our targeting systems, they can't lock on. The ship is invisible to our weapons." Malvar's claws dug deeper into the armrests. This was no malfunction. This was design. The human vessel continued its approach, its angular silhouette growing larger in the viewport. Then, without warning, it vanished, not into stealth, not into some cloaking field. It simply ceased to register on any scan. One moment it was there, a silent predator gliding through the void. The next, it was gone, the bridge erupted into chaos. Where did it? Scanners. Show nothing. Did it jump? Impossible without an energy spike. Malvar silenced them with a single raised claw. His mind raced. The humans were supposed to be backward, their technology laughable. They had barely reached their own moon when the Malthari first observed them. Their wars fought with chemical explosives and crude fission devices. But this was something else. A cold realization settled in his chest. The galaxy had long whispered of Terra, of the sleeping giants who dwelled there. Ancient beacons, half buried in the ruins of dead empires, carried warnings in 1,000 languages. Do not wake them. The Malthari had dismissed them as superstition. Now Malvar wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. "Captain," Thelalan said, his voice hollow. "We're receiving a transmission." Malvar turned, his crest stiffening. "From where?" Thelalan's fingers trembled over the console. "From's inside our ship." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Then the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the S-Sovereign's will. For 3 heartbeats, the Malthari command deck was silent. No hum of the crystalline drives. No whisper of ionized air through the vents. Only the faint, panicked breathing of the crew. Then the emergency luminescence flickered on, casting the chamber in a sickly violet glow. The ship's organic architecture, usually flowing with liquid energy, now pulsed erratically, veins of light spasming across the walls. Malvar's claws dug into his command throne. His secondary eyelids flicked shut, then open again, adjusting to the dimness. His mind raced through possibilities: sabotage, system failure, an unseen weapon. But the humans had boarded them. That was impossible. The Malthari had perfected void warfare for millennia. Their ships were living fortresses, their shields woven from the very fabric of ionized atmosphere. No species had ever breached them, not without warning, not without a battle, yet here they were. "Report," Malvar snarled. Thelalan's voice was thin, barely audible over the creaking groan of the ship's strained infrastructure. "Captain, the intruder signal is gone. Vanished. Like it was never there." Malvar exhaled through his nasal slits. "A glitch, then? A sensor malfunction? The humans couldn't have," a proximity alert shrieked. Thelalan jerked back from his console as if burned. "Another vessel! Directly ahead!" The main display flickered to life, revealing the void beyond. And there it was, a silhouette against the stars, jagged, angular, a brutalist slab of blackened metal, where the Malthari's own ships flowed like liquid silver. It loomed closer, drifting without thrusters, without the telltale shimmer of a warp field. As if it had simply appeared from nothing. Malvar's crest flattened against his skull, the human ship. It was bigger now. Scans rippled across the screen, struggling to parse the vessel structure. Its hull was a patchwork of scarred armor plating, welded seams visible even at this distance. No graceful curves, no bioluminescent energy channels, just raw, reinforced steel. And then the name etched across its prow, resolved in the Malthari translation matrix of U. Reso. Thelalan's breath hitched. "Captain, it's broadcasting." A sound crackled through the comms. At first, it was just static, a hiss of dead air. Then, beneath the noise, a voice, human, male, distorted by time and distance, but unmistakable in its tone. This is Colonel Janet Reynolds of the United Nations Starship Resolute. To any Malthari vessel receiving this transmission, you are in violation of Terran sovereign space. Withdraw immediately. Second a pause. Then the same message repeated. Malvar's blood ran cold. This wasn't a live transmission. It was a recording. Thelalan's claws trembled over the console. Captain, the timestamp on this broadcast. Malvar didn't need to hear the rest. He already knew the transmission was old. Decades old, which meant that US Resolute had been here, silent and unseen. Long before the Malthari ever entered the system. The realization settled over the bridge like a funeral shroud. The humans had known they were coming. And they had let them get this close. Malvar's throat tightened. Ancient beacons had warned of sleeping giants. The Malthari had laughed. Now, the giants were awake. This Resolute hung in the void like a specter, its battered hull scarred by decades of silent vigil. The Malthari scanners painted it in pulses of violet light, revealing a truth that made Malvar's crystalline blood run colder still. The ship was alive, not just operational, alive. Its reactors hummed at minimal power, its sensors passively drinking in the cosmos, its weapons systems dormant, but primed. Thelalan's claws danced across the holographic interface, her bioluminescent veins flickering with unease as she parsed the data. Captain, she murmured, her voice barely above the whisper of the ship's atmospheric condensers. The humans, they didn't just leave this vessel here. They says anchored it. Malvar's crest of silver spines flexed involuntarily. Explain. Thelalan gestured to the readouts. This Resolute isn't drifting. Its position is fixed not by gravity, not by thrusters. It's tethered. A ripple of confusion passed through the bridge crew. Tethered to what? Then the scans deepened. Beneath the human warship, hidden in the black, lay a lattice of energy conduits, crude by Malthari standards, but brutally efficient. They pulsed with a slow, rhythmic thrum, feeding the US Resolute just enough power to keep its heart beating. Malvar's mind raced. This wasn't a derelict. This was a sentry, and sentries had one purpose. "Hi, Captain," hissed one of the tactical officers. His aurora lit eyes wide. "The human vessel, its weapons are cycling." Malvar didn't hesitate. "Fire a warning shot. Disruptor pulse, minimal yield." The Malthari vessel obeyed. A lance of purple, white energy lanced out, striking this Resolute's flank. An Essa sank into the hull like water into sand. No explosion, no scorched metal, no ripple of feedback. The energy disappeared. Thelalan's breath caught. "Captain, the human ship, just there absorbed our attack." Before Malvar could respond, the S Resolute moved. Not with the graceful flow of Malthari kinetics, but with a brutal, mechanical certainty. Its forward batteries massive, blocky things that looked more like industrial machinery than weapons, swiveled toward them. Then it fired. The projectile was unlike anything the Malthari had ever seen. No energy signature, no plasma trail, just a blackened slug of metal hurtling at impossible speed. It struck the Malthari shields. Ars and Zeph detonated into a storm of razor-edged fragments. The shield flared violet, then a cracked spiderwebbing with fractures before collapsing entirely. Alarms shrieked. The bridge lights dimmed as power rerouted to emergency systems. Malvar gripped the command dais, his mind reeling. That wasn't a plasma lance. That wasn't a disruptor. That was a kinetic weaponry, primitive, by galactic standards. Yet it had shattered their defenses in a single shot. Thelalan's voice was hollow. They turned our own energy against us. The disruptor pulse, it charged their systems. A cold understanding settled over Malvar. The humans hadn't just waited, they had baited them. And now, this Resolute's secondary systems were waking up. Across its hull, panels slid open, revealing rows of cylindrical pods. Thelalan's scanners screamed as they identified the contents, the boarding drones. Not sleek, not elegant, jagged, asymmetrical horrors of welded metal and exposed circuitry, their forward mandibles lined with serrated blades. Malvar had seen Malthari boarding craft. They were works of art, flowing, organic things designed to pierce and disable with surgical precision. These were butcher's tools, and they were launching. The first rule of war, Malvar realized with dawning horror, was not technology. It was their psychology. The humans had let them get close. Let them feel safe. Let them underestimate. And now the sleeping giant was awake. And it was hungry. The US Resolute did not move like a dying ship. It moved like a predator. Malvar watched the tactical display with growing unease as the human vessel's thrusters flared, its massive bulk pivoting with eerie precision. The boarding drones, those crude, jagged monstrosities, streaked toward his fleet in erratic, unpredictable vectors. No elegant formation, no synchronized assault, just a swarm of brutal efficiency, closing the distance with terrifying speed. Thelalin's voice was a whisper of disbelief. Their systems, they're adapting. The disruptor pulse should have crippled them, but they used it. Malvar finished, his mandibles tightening. The realization settled like ice in his veins. The humans had not merely endured the attack. They had repurposed it. These Resolute's energy signatures pulsed erratically, its power fluctuations stabilizing not in spite of the disruptor, but because of it. The Malthari's own weapon had been turned against them, its energy absorbed, rerouted, fed into dormant systems now roaring to life. Malvar's claws flexed against the command console. This was not supposed to happen. Malthari technology was superior. Their weapons were refined, their tactics honed over centuries of dominance. Yet here, against this battered relic of human defiance, they were being outmaneuvered. A proximity alert shrieked. The first drone struck. It did not pierce the hull with surgical precision. It is slammed into the Dawn's edgy, its serrated mandibles tearing through the outer plating like a beast ripping flesh. The Malthari shielding, designed to disperse energy attacks, buckled under sheer kinetic force. Then the second impact came, and the third. Malvar's ship shuddered as the drones burrowed inward, their crude, asymmetrical forms bypassing failsafes, ignoring logic. They were not elegant. They were not meant to be. They were meant to kill, inside this Resolute. Something even more unsettling was happening. Thelalin's scanners flickered, struggling to parse the data. Commander, the human vessel's core systems are still active, but... His voice faltered. There are no life signs. Malvar turned, his crest flaring in disbelief. None. None. Thelalin's frills darkened with unease. The crew is gone. Dead. But the ship is still fighting, Malvar finished. A cold understanding settled over him. The Resolute was not just a warship. It was of ghost, and its A was learning. Every exchange, every failed attack, every Malthari maneuver, the human machine absorbed it, analyzed it, adapted. What had begun as a simple miscalculation was now a battle against something far more dangerous than flesh and blood. It was a battle against X memory, against S will, against the last command of a dead crew, echoing through the void. Malvar's instincts screamed at him to retreat. Pride warred with survival. The Malthari did not flee. They did not yield, but they also did not fight the dead. Across the bridge, his officers waited, their postures tense, their frills flickering with uncertainty. They had come expecting a broken relic, a final lesson in human frailty. Instead, they had found a tomb that refused to close. Malvar exhaled slowly, his decision crystallizing. Fall back, he ordered. Regroup beyond engagement range. Thelalan hesitated. Commander, the High Conclave will soar. Fall back, Malvar repeated, his voice edged with something unfamiliar. Something almost like respect. The Resolute did not pursue. It did not need to, it had already won. As the Malthari fleet disengaged, the human warship hung in the void, its battered hull still glowing with stolen energy, its weapons still primed. A silent sentinel of a dead species' defiance. And for the first time in his long, proud life, Malvar wondered if the galaxy had made a terrible mistake. The humans were gone, but their ghosts. Their ghosts were everywhere. The was resolute, hung in the void like a shattered monument, its hull a grotesque tapestry of melted armor and exposed superstructure. Yet it still moved, still fought. Malvar's frills twitched in involuntary distress as the Malthari flagship's sensors painted the human warship in streams of violet, white diagnostics. The readings made no sense. The resolute should have been dead. Its reactor core was a ruin, its containment fields flickering like a dying star. Yet instead of collapsing into a cooling husk, the ship pulsed with erratic energy surges, each one sending fresh tremors through the Malthari fleet's tactical displays. Thelalin's claws tightened around the edge of the holoprojector, his bioluminescent veins flaring in agitation. "Commander," he said, voice strained, "their reactor isn't failing. It's overloading." Malvar's blood ran cold. He had seen this before, in the last moments of a cornered predator, teeth bared even as its lifeblood into the dirt. A final, spiteful act of defiance, but this was no beast. This was a warship. And it was choosing to die like this. Thus Resolute's remaining thrusters flared, not in retreat, but in a slow, deliberate rotation, aligning its shattered spine toward the heart of the Malthari formation. Its weapons, half destroyed, still glowed with malevolent readiness. Malvar's mind raced. Human reactors were crude things, volatile, inefficient, prone to catastrophic failure. The Malthari had dismissed them as yet another sign of human recklessness. Now, he understood. They had designed them this way. A reactor wasn't just a power source. It was a weapon, a last, desperate gambit, one that turned a dying ship into a bomb. This Resolute wasn't trying to win, it was trying to take them with it. The realization struck Malvar like a physical blow. This wasn't just defiance, it was calculation. The humans had known, that even in death, they could still strike, that their wreckage could be a threat, and they had planned for it. Thelalin's voice cut through the silence, sharp with disbelief. They're sacrificing it. Deliberately. Malvar didn't answer. His gaze remained locked on Thes Resolute, its broken form silhouetted against the distant stars. The ship's reactor pulsed again, brighter this time, its energy signature swelling like a dying star's final breath. The Malthari fleet's shields flared in response, their crystalline matrices straining under the mounting radiation. Malvar exhaled slowly. "Full retreat," he ordered, his voice hollow. "Now." Thelilin hesitated. "Commander, the High Conclave will burn with the rest of us if we stay." Malvar snapped. The bridge fell silent. The Resolute's reactor reached critical. For a single terrible moment, the void itself seemed to hold its breath. A searing, annihilating wave of energy erupted from the human warship, swallowing its broken form in a corona of white fire. The shockwave ripped through space, distorting the very fabric of reality as it tore toward the Malthari fleet. Shields buckled, hulls screamed, and for the first time in centuries, Malvar felt something he had long forgotten. When the light faded, the Resolute was gone. Only debris remained, twisted metal and scorched alloy, drifting in the silent dark. But the lesson lingered. Humans did not die quietly. They died loudly, and they made sure their enemies remembered it. Malvar's frills lay flat against his skull, his breath uneven. Thelilin stood frozen beside him, his claws still gripping the console as if it could steady him. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to say. The humans were extinct. But their ghosts were vengeful. The silence on the Malthari command deck was thick, suffocating. The air tasted of ionized metal and something else, something acrid, like the ozone after a storm. Malvar's frills remained pressed tight to his skull. His pulse a steady, too fast rhythm beneath his crystalline hide. Thelilin had not moved from the sensor array, his claws still curled around the edges of the console, his bioluminescent markings flickering erratically, but unmistakably as human. Thelilin's head snapped up, his violet eyes widening. "Malvar," he breathed, the word barely more than a whisper. Malvar turned, his crest spine stiffening. What? Tellolan's claws danced across the console, his movements frantic. The wreckage, it's transmitting. A ripple passed through the bridge crew. The Malthari exchanged glances, their frills twitching in unease. Play it, Malvar ordered. Tellolan hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, before complying. Static hissed through the air, then resolved into a voice. A human voice, it was ragged, strained, but unmistakably alive. This is Captain Evan Keller of the Terran warship Resolute. Final log entry. The words sent a shiver through Malvar's spine. The humans had been dead for hours. And yet, here was their voice, speaking from the grave. The transmission crackled, the voice dipping in and out. We knew we wouldn't make it. The Malthari fleet was too big, too fast. But we weren't going to let them take Earth without a fight. A pause. A sharp intake of breath. So we rigged the core. Every last scrap of antimatter containment, every reactor, every warhead, wired it all into one final detonation. Tellolan's frills flared. Malvar's claws dug into the armrest of his command throne. You don't get to kill us and walk away. The words were calm. Matter of fact, and utterly terrifying. The transmission flickered, the voice growing fainter. We knew the cost, we knew the price, and we paid it. Gladly. Another pause, then, softer. Tell them, Malvar. Tell them what happens when you push humans into a corner. Cess a burst of static. And nothing, the bridge was deathly still. Malvar exhaled, his frills trembling. Tellolan's claws had gone slack against the console, his bioluminescence dimmed. The humans had known they would die. And they had chosen this, not out of desperation, not out of fear, but out of spite. A slow, creeping horror settled over the Malthari crew. This was not the act of a desperate, dying species. This was Ev's message, and it was not just for them. It was for every empire that had ever looked at humanity and thought them weak. Malvar's throat tightened, the humans were gone. But their defiance was eternal. The silence on the Resolute's bridge was absolute. Malvar's frills remained rigid, his claws locked around the command console. Tellolan's bioluminescent veins pulsed erratically, casting flickering violet shadows across the crystalline walls. The human transmission had ended, but its echo lingered, a ghost in the ship's systems, a weight in the air. Then the sensors screamed. A surge of energy flared from the wreckage of the human vessel. Not the dying flicker of a gutted warship, but something's awakening. Malvar's secondary eyelids snapped shut for a fraction of a second, a Malthari instinct. A reflex against sudden light. When they opened again, the holographic displays were alight with warnings. Core breach detected, gravitational anomaly spiking, unknown energy signature. Tellolan's voice was a whisper. They rigged their own reactor. Malvar didn't need the confirmation. He had seen the readings. The humans hadn't just accepted death, they had engineered it. Their ship wasn't merely destroyed, it was primating. And now it was detonating. Emergency jump. Malvar barked, his vocal membranes vibrating with urgency. No. The Resolute's drive flared to life, streams of purple, white energy swirling through its atmospheric condensers, as it prepared to tear open a rift in reality. The crew moved with precision, their movements honed by centuries of discipline. But the human wreckage moved with them. Tellolan's claws dug into his console. It's following us! Malvar's frills flattened against his skull. Impossible. A dead ship couldn't maneuver, a dead ship couldn't pursue. But yet the sensors didn't lie. The wreckage wasn't drifting, it was dragging itself forward, pulled by some unseen force. No, not pulled. Held. A gravity tether. The realization struck Malvar like a plasma round to the chest. The humans hadn't just rigged their core to breach. They had anchored it to this Resolute with a gravitational weapon, a device designed to ensure that even in death, they would not die alone. The jump drive whined, straining against the unnatural pull. The rift flickered, unstable. Cut the tether! Malvar, ordered.
Trying.
Thelalin's voice was strained. Their systems are locked.
They've hacked our stabilizers.
A cold, creeping horror slithered through Malvar's veins. The humans hadn't just planned for their own destruction. They had planned for this moment. For the Maltharis desperation. For their attempt to flee, and they had made sure escape was impossible. The Resolute shuddered as the human ship's reactor reached critical mass. The energy surge distorted space itself, warping the Malthari vessel's elegant, wind-carved hull. Bioluminescent panels shattered. Aerogel supports groaned under the strain. The core detonated. The explosion wasn't fire and shrapnel. It was something worse, a rupture. A tear in the fabric of reality, a maw of distorted gravity that swallowed light, energy matter. This Resolute's shields flared, crystalline barriers meant to deflect plasma and radiation. But they were never meant to withstand this. The ship lurched. Alarms wailed. Malvar's vision swam as the Resolute tumbled through the void, its systems flickering. The bridge was dark, lit only by the erratic pulses of dying consoles. The air tasted of ionized metal and something acrid, burnt circuitry, or perhaps the scent of fear. Thelin was the first to speak. His voice was hollow. They knew. Malvar didn't answer. He didn't need to. The humans had known everything. This wasn't a battle. It was a trap. And the Malthari had walked right into it. The Resolute drifted, a broken thing, its once gleaming hull, carved from flowing silver alloys and reinforced with translucent crystal lattices, now bore deep scars, jagged fissures where human railgun rounds had punched through, blackened streaks from plasma burns. Entire sections warped by the unnatural forces, unleashed in the Resolute's final, desperate strike. The ship's bioluminescent panels flickered erratically, casting ghostly violet pulses across the ruined bridge. The air was thick with the scent of scorched aerogel and something darker, something metallic and sharp. The smell of a dying vessel. Malvar gripped the command ace, his talons digging into the smooth, organic metal. His crest, normally held high in pride, lay flat against his skull, a subconscious admission of defeat. His secondary eyelids flicked shut for a moment, shielding his eyes from the dim, pulsing light. They knew. The thought echoed in his mind, cold and inescapable. The humans had known the Malthari would come. They had known the SS Resolute would target their engines first, had known the Malthari would rely on their superior shielding, had known everything, and they had let them. Thelalin's voice cut through the silence, his words brittle. The core breach. It wasn't an accident. Malvar didn't answer. He didn't need to. The humans had engineered it. This, Resolute's last-ditch weapon, the Singularity Lance, had been meant to obliterate the human vessel in a single, devastating strike. But the humans had anticipated it. They had let the Malthari fire. Had Wes let the rupture form, and then, in the heartbeat before annihilation, they had done something impossible. They had redirected it. Malvar's mind reeled at the implications. The humans hadn't just outmaneuvered them tactically. They had weaponized the Maltharis' own destruction against them. A low hum vibrated through the deck as the ship's failing systems struggled to maintain life support. Thelalin's fingers danced across a cracked console, his movements frantic. The containment fields are collapsing. We have minutes before the secondary reactors go critical. Malvar exhaled, slow and deliberate. He had studied human warfare. He had read their histories, analyzed their strategies, dissected their victories and defeats. He had thought he understood them. He had been wrong. Humans did not fight like the Malthari. They did not duel with honor, did not adhere to the elegant, measured warfare of the galactic powers. They fought like animals, like creatures with nothing to lose. And that was the realization that chilled him most. The humans had not been trying to survive. They had been trying to win. A flicker on the view screen caught his attention. The wreckage of the human ship, what little remained, spun lazily in the void. its shattered hull still glowing from the heat of the rupture. And yet, even now, something moved among the debris. A distress beacon, not a distress beacon. A transmission. Thelalan stiffened as the console spat out a burst of static, then resolved into a voice, human, female, calm. F's. Malthari vessel, this is Colonel Janet Reynolds of the Terran Defense Fleet. If you're receiving this, you've already lost. Malvar's blood ran cold. The transmission wasn't live, it had been Alir's recorded. Huh. You came here thinking you could break us, the voice continued, almost conversational. You thought we were weak, fragile, unprepared. A pause. But you forgot one thing. Thelalan's breath hitched. We've been fighting monsters for thousands of years. The transmission cut out. A new signal. A second ship, emerging from the dark. Malvar's crest flared in alarm as the sensors registered the incoming vessel, larger, sleeker, its hull a matte black that drank in the light. No energy signatures, no emissions. It had been waiting. Thelalan's voice was barely a whisper. They've knew. Malvar closed his eyes. They had known, and now, the Malthari would learn the final lesson humanity had to teach. Survival was not the point. Victory was. And humans always won. The wreckage of the Resolute was gone. Malvar stood in the dim glow of the Malthari salvage bay, his talons flexing against the smooth, aerogel flooring. The humans had pulled them from the void, to save them. But the act carried no kindness. It was a message, a lesson. Thelalan moved beside him, his bioluminescent markings flickering with unease. Their rescuers had not spoken, had not gloated. They had simply delivered the Malthari survivors to their own crippled vessel, then vanished back into the black. And the Resolute. Not destroyed, not left to drift, only one fragment remained. A single twisted shard of alloy, no larger than Malvar's forearm, resting on an analysis pedestal. The surface was scorched, warped, but not by weapons fire. No, this was deliberate. Etched into the metal, in precise, angular script, were human words. Thelalan's translator chimed softly as it parsed the glyphs, his breath stilled. Remember this. A shiver traced Malvar's spine. The words were not a plea, not a warning, of command. Thelalan reached out, his talons hovering just above the metal. They knew we would find this, he murmured. They left it for us. Malvar exhaled slowly, his crest flattening against his skull. The humans had known, they had known the Malthari would come. Known they would attack, known they would lose. And still, they had let them live. Not out of mercy, out of certainty. Thelalan's voice was hollow. The beacons. The warnings. We should have listened. Malvar closed his eyes. Ancient things slept on Terra, and now they were awake. The fragment hummed faintly under the scanner's violet light, its edges catching the glow like a blade. Thelalan had run every analysis, every spectral sweep, every molecular deconstruction. No hidden data, no traps, no last trick, just the words. Remember this. A whisper in the dark. A monument to their failure. Malvar turned away, his claws clicking against the floor. The humans had not even needed to destroy them. They had simply shown them the truth. And that was worse, because now the Malthari would carry this lesson home. Now they would be the ones to warn the rest. Now they would remember, and the galaxy. The galaxy would learn. The weight of knowing the fragment remained on the scanner's platform, inert, unyielding. Thelalan's claws hovered over it, trembling. He had expected defiance. Some final act of human spite, a detonation, a curse, a final strike from beyond the grave. This was worse, this was precision. The humans had not merely defeated them. They had measured them. Calculated the exact depth of their fear, the exact moment their arrogance would shatter. And then, with surgical cruelty, they had left them this, not as a taunt, not as a trophy, but as a lesson. A lesson the Malthari would never forget. Malvar stood at the viewport, watching the distant pinprick of Terra's star. The system was silent now, no transmissions, no energy signatures, just the quiet hum of space. indifferent to their dread. The humans had withdrawn, not in retreat, in as disinterest. The realization settled into Malvar's bones like ice. They had not been deemed worthy of further engagement. The Malthari, with all their crystalline fleets and flowing aurora tech, had been assessed, found lacking, and dismissed. Now they would return to the consensus. They would stand before the High Synod and speak of what they had seen. They would show them the fragment, the words, the hollow terror of knowing that the galaxy's oldest predators had been watching all along. And the Synod would not believe them. Not at first. There would be debates, denials, accusations of madness or deception. Some would call for another fleet, a greater force, a final purge. Others would whisper of treaties, of bargains, of bending knee before the storm. But in the end, they would all remember. Just as the humans had intended, Thelolin exhaled, mandibles clicking softly. We should go. Malvar did not move. Somewhere, in the dark between stars, something ancient stirred, and it was laughing.